Friday evening in Los Angeles carried that particular electricity that only live television could conjure, a cross between nerves and spectacle. It was another taping night for Real Time with Bill Maher. For the crew, it was routine. For the audience, it was an event. But for one guest waiting behind the curtain, it was something else entirely. A confrontation she didn't yet know was coming. Backstage, Meghan Markle sat in the makeup chair, posture straight, expression calm. The hum of studio chatter drifted through the walls, bursts of laughter from the audience. Maher's signature sarcasm echoing faintly as he tested lines with his warm-up team. She barely reacted. Her reflection in the mirror was composed perfection. Dark hair, parted cleanly, cascading in soft waves, a black pantsuit tailored to precision, gold jewelry catching the glow of the dressing room lights. The stylist handed her a small mirror. "Final check?" She smiled briefly, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "It's fine," she said. The assistant to her left, a young woman with a clipboard, shifted nervously. 5 minutes, Duchess." Meghan turned slightly, that title hanging between them. "Just Meghan tonight," she said. The tone was light but firm. Down the hall, Bill Maher was already pacing outside the set doors. He carried a single cue card, though everyone knew he rarely needed one. 20 years of interviews had given him the kind of confidence that bordered on arrogance, or charm, depending on who you asked. He glanced toward the floor manager. "She's ready?" "Any second," came the reply. Bill smirked. "Good. Let's see what royalty looks like under real lights." The countdown began. The audience clapped in rhythm as the stage manager raised his hand. The familiar brass intro music rolled through the studio speakers, washing over the set like adrenaline. Maher took his seat, leaned back, and began his opening monologue, a few quick-fire jokes about politics, California traffic, and social media hypocrisy. The crowd roared on cue. His delivery was smooth, playful, disarming, but his eyes, even while smiling, stayed sharp. Behind the curtain, Meghan listened. Each laugh from the crowd seemed to draw her further into focus. She had faced the British tabloids, Oprah, world leaders. A talk show should have been easy, but the weight in her chest said otherwise. The floor manager leaned in. "You're next." Her lips curved slightly, more out of habit than emotion. "Let's do it." The studio lights flared. "And now," Maher announced, turning toward the camera, "please welcome Meghan Markle." The audience erupted in applause, half excitement, half curiosity. She stepped out onto the glossy stage, her heels steady, her posture elegant. The black suit against the golden light gave her an aura that was both commanding and distant. The cheers swelled, then softened as she reached the desk. Bill rose, extending his hand. "Welcome, Meghan." "Thank you, Bill," she replied, her smile perfectly measured. They took their seats, two professionals, two public figures, two predators circling civility. Bill leaned back in his chair, crossing one leg over the other. "So," he began, voice smooth, "it's not every night we have a Duchess in the studio. How's life outside the castle?" A light laugh escaped her, practiced and polite. "I wouldn't call it a castle anymore. Life is busy, purposeful," he repeated. "That's a good word. You've had quite the journey. Actress, royal, activist, podcaster. Most people retire after one life. You've had 3. She tilted her head, acknowledging the comment but refusing the bait. "I believe growth requires change." Bill nodded, lips curling faintly. "Change is good. Though some might say you've gone from one spotlight to another." The crowd laughed lightly, unsure if it was meant as humor or critique. Meghan's eyes flickered toward him but stayed calm. "I think people confuse visibility with intention. Just because you're seen doesn't mean you're seeking." He grinned. "Maybe. But you do keep being seen." The audience chuckled again, sensing tension under the politeness. Bill moved effortlessly to his next cue card, though the card was just theater. He already knew where this was going. "Let's talk about that visibility," he said. "You and Prince Harry left the royal family to focus on privacy and personal well-being. But since then, Netflix deals, books, podcasts, interviews. You're in headlines weekly. So tell me, did you really leave the royal life behind, or did you just rebrand it?" The question landed like a stone dropped in still water. Meghan's smile didn't falter, but her shoulders stiffened ever so slightly. "We left to reclaim our autonomy. That's not rebranding, it's surviving." A few in the audience clapped, others stayed quiet. Bill's smirk returned. Fair point, he said, though most people don't survive with multi-million-dollar production contracts. A soft murmur ran through the audience. She blinked once, then replied evenly, "Success doesn't erase struggle, Bill. It just changes what it looks like." He nodded slowly, pretending to agree, though his grin widened. "I'll buy that, though I think struggle looks different in Montecito than it does in, say, downtown LA. The crowd laughed again. This time, the laughter lingered. She held his gaze. Maybe compassion shouldn't depend on zip codes. The audience reacted. A low, surprise sound, unsure whether to clap or hold breath. Maher tilted his head, amused. "Touché," he said. But behind his smile, the shift had already begun. In the control booth above, producers exchanged quick glances. The tone was teetering. Normally, interviews like these had an invisible rhythm. Light talk, gentle tension, laughter, relief. But tonight, the laughter felt tight. Every pause stretched longer than it should have. Every smile was edged. At the desk, the dance continued. "So," Bill said casually, "you've been vocal about mental health, media pressure, and leaving toxic environments. Do you ever worry that the message gets lost when people see the money, the fame, the mansion?" Meghan nodded, unbothered. "People will always find something to misunderstand. What matters is speaking truth, not pleasing everyone." "Right," Bill said, leaning forward slightly. "But truth can also be convenient, can it? You tell your side, they can't answer, and you walk away with the narrative." Meghan's fingers interlaced on the desk. The audience could sense the change, the temperature dropping, civility thinning. "My story isn't a narrative," she said quietly. "It's experience." "There's a difference," Bill leaned back, studying her face. "Maybe so. But it does play well on Netflix." The audience laughed uneasily, then quieted. Meghan didn't. She smiled again, faintly, coldly. "And controversy plays well on HBO." The jab landed clean. The crowd erupted. Bill's smirk froze for a beat before he chuckled, deflecting the blow. "Fair enough," he said, voice calm but clipped. "Guess we both know our audiences." The seconds after that exchange stretched long. The studio's heat lamp seemed brighter, the laughter shorter. It wasn't hostility, not yet, but it was close. The camera cut to a close-up. Bill's grin, tight and gleaming, Meghan's expression, poised and unreadable. In that single frame, you could already see the fracture line forming, the invisible moment before control slips. "Anyway," Bill said, clearing his throat, "let's pivot to your charity work." Meghan nodded. "Of course." But the warmth didn't return. The ease was gone. Every sentence now carried a faint undertone, something guarded, something brittle. He asked about her foundation. She answered politely. He praised her initiatives. She thanked him. But between them, silence kept intruding. That heavy silence that wasn't just air, but tension made tangible. In the audience, the laughter softened. People weren't sure what they were watching anymore. 15 minutes into the segment, the energy had shifted completely. From the outside, it still looked professional. Two adults talking. But under the lights, it felt like a chess match. Maher adjusted his microphone, pretending to check his notes. "You know," he said offhandedly, "a lot of people admire what you've done, standing up to the institution, the tradition. But others wonder if you went too far. I mean, you married into one of the most historic families in the world and then publicly criticized it. Did you ever think about how that might come across?" The phrasing was mild, but the edge was unmistakable. She hesitated, just a fraction of a second, but it showed. "I didn't criticize," she replied. "I shared my truth." "That's not the same thing. Truth is subjective," Bill said. "So is judgment," she answered. The audience murmured, sensing the rising temperature. Maher smiled, leaning back. "Touché again," he said, though the amusement in his voice was thinning. "You're good at this." "I've had practice," she said. He laughed, short, sharp, without warmth. "Yeah, I bet you have." And then the silence again, heavy, awkward, electric. From the control booth, a producer muttered, "We might need to go to break early." Another shook her head. "Not yet." This is gold back on stage. Both Bill and Meghan sat perfectly still. The applause sign flickered half-heartedly, prompting the audience to react. They clapped uncertainly, some smiling, others whispering. Maher straightened his jacket. "All right, Meghan. We'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk about life after the crown." The cameras pulled back. Music swelled. The audience clapped louder, relieved for the pause. As the red light above the camera flicked off, Bill exhaled and leaned toward her slightly. "Good segment," he said. She didn't look at him. "Depends who you're rooting for," he smirked. "I'm rooting for the truth." "Then stop trying to provoke it out of people," she replied. He chuckled softly. "This is real time, not story time." Her gaze met his, steady. "Sometimes stories are more honest than jokes." For a moment, neither moved. Just the hum of the set, the faint shuffle of crew preparing for part two. Bill leaned back, half amused, half irritated. "You really don't flinch, do you?" "No reason to," she said simply. But under the bright white lights, the faintest trace of color had risen to her cheeks. The makeup artist rushed in, dabbing her forehead quickly before retreating. The countdown resumed. Maher glanced toward the live camera. His smirk returned, practiced, confident, untouchable. Back in 5, 4, 3, the red light blinked on again. The audience applauded. And as the second half of the interview began, everyone in that studio, from the crew to the viewers at home, felt it. Something was about to go wrong. The applause faded into a hush. When the lights brightened again, something invisible had shifted. The air inside the real-time studio felt charged, not with laughter this time, but with anticipation, the kind that creeps in when everyone senses a storm forming just beyond the horizon. Bill leaned forward slightly, his fingers drumming the edge of the desk. Meghan adjusted the hem of her blazer, composed but unblinking. The audience waited, eyes darting between them. "Welcome back," Bill said, voice steady. "We're here with Meghan Markle, former actress, advocate, and of course, a member of the world's most famous family." He smiled. The words "former" and "of course" hung like weights in the air. Meghan smiled back, polite, though her shoulders stiffened by a degree. "Now," Bill continued, "you've been very public about the pressures you faced, the tabloid intrusion, the scrutiny. I think everyone agrees that kind of attention can be brutal." He paused, feigning sympathy. "But what fascinates me is how you've turned that pain into an entire platform." A few soft laughs broke from the crowd. Meghan tilted her head, curious but cautious. "I think turning experience into purpose is what most people try to do," she replied. "Pain that doesn't serve growth is just pain." Bill nodded as if agreeing. "Absolutely. But growth can also look a lot like branding, can it?" The studio's air turned thinner. She blinked slowly once. "If you mean being visible while doing work that matters, then yes, I suppose authenticity is my brand." "Authenticity," Bill repeated, almost tasting the word. "That's interesting. Because when people think of authenticity, they don't usually think of Montecito. Laughter, uneasy, sharp." He leaned back. "Let's be honest, Meghan. For a lot of folks, your life now looks like a PR campaign. Private jets, red carpets, award speeches about humility. Doesn't that feel contradictory?" Her lips pressed together, but she kept her voice calm. "It's easy to call something hypocrisy when you don't understand the context." Bill nodded, leaning forward. "That's fair. So explain the context." There it was, the trap disguised as an invitation. Meghan inhaled slowly. "I came from a background where visibility was a privilege. I learned early that silence protects systems that don't serve everyone. I speak because others can't." Bill tapped the desk with his pen. "And yet," he said lightly, "you've managed to stay remarkably visible for someone escaping the spotlight." A few in the crowd snickered, her jaw tightened. "Visibility isn't the same as obsession, Bill. One is choice, the other is projection." His grin sharpened. "I'll let the viewers decide which one applies here." The audience chuckled again, sensing blood. Up in the control booth, the producer mouthed, "Don't cut." This was the kind of tension that made ratings soar. Bill switched gears, feigning curiosity. "Let's talk about family. When you and Prince Harry stepped down, the palace called it a personal decision. But the tabloids, and even some insiders, suggested you forced his hand, that you pulled him away from his family. What do you say to that?" The question dropped like a hammer. Even the crew's movement slowed. Meghan's face remained still, but her eyes darkened. "I think that accusation says more about people's views on women than it does about my marriage. Harry is his own man, always has been. So you're saying you didn't influence him?" I influenced him the way partners influence each other, through love, respect, and mutual understanding. Bill nodded slowly, lips curling, but to the public, it looked like control. Isolation. Some might say manipulation. Her voice didn't rise, but it sharpened. Some might also say that narrative is sexist. Sexist, Bill repeated, leaning back, eyebrows raised. Yes, she said simply. You wouldn't ask a husband if he manipulated his wife for leaving a job that was destroying her mental health. A murmur of applause rippled through the audience. Bill's smirk faltered, but only slightly. You're right, he said after a pause. But it's hard to ignore the fact that since you left, there's been a lot of storytelling. Netflix, interviews, documentaries. It feels like you replaced one royal court with another. Her expression didn't change. It feels like you're mistaking storytelling for survival again, Bill chuckled softly. Or survival for storytelling. The laughter returned, louder this time. Meghan glanced at the crowd, just briefly, then back at him. You know, Bill, it's fascinating that people who have never lived a day in my life feel entitled to define what's authentic for me. He raised his eyebrows. You came here to talk about your truth, didn't you? Not to have it weaponized, she replied. The audience murmured again, not laughter this time, but that hushed collective intake of breath that happens when things start to get personal. Bill's smirk froze just enough for her to notice. On cue, he shifted direction. Let's go back to before the palace. You were on Suits, fun show, clever writing, but some people say you were a B-list actress before marrying into A-list royalty. How does that feel? A pin could have dropped. Even the cameraman hesitated. Meghan blinked once, then twice. I was a working actress, she said. I paid my bills, I hustled, I learned. There's no shame in earning your place, Bill shrugged. Absolutely, but it wasn't the crown. The audience laughed, sensing the provocation. Meghan smiled faintly. No, it was fiction. Not propaganda. Laughter again, louder this time, and for the first time it wasn't on Bill's side. His lips twitched in irritation before he leaned forward, elbows on the desk. Okay, he said, but let's be honest. Your global fame didn't come from Suits. It came from marrying a prince. Isn't that fair? Meghan's gaze didn't waver. I fell in love with a person, not a title. If that's hard to believe, maybe it says more about how transactional you think love has to be. The audience clapped again, hesitant but genuine. Bill waited for the sound to fade, then delivered his next line like a knife. Or maybe it's because it looks transactional. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Even the lighting seemed to thicken. Meghan's smile vanished completely. That's cruel, she said softly but firmly. Maybe, Bill said, but not inaccurate. Her jaw flexed. You reduce a marriage, a family, to a deal because it fits your cynicism. That's not journalism, that's ego. Bill gave a small, humorless laugh. I don't do journalism. I do reality, she repeated, the word rolling off her tongue like contempt. Then maybe look at your own reflection. The audience gasped. One man in the front row clapped once before stopping himself. Bill's smile tightened into something brittle. All right, he said, let's take it there. The tension was tangible now. The laughter stopped altogether. Every exchange had become a blade, every pause a wound. Bill adjusted his tie. Let's talk about hypocrisy, he said, pretending to stay casual. You've built an empire on self-empowerment and mental health awareness, and yet you've used the same media machine you claim destroyed you. Isn't that convenient? Her eyes flashed. You think telling the truth about trauma is convenience? I think monetizing it is, Bill replied. The crowd gasped. A few people murmured in disagreement. Meghan straightened in her chair. I think you mistake healing for performance because you've never had to do either in public. Bill's pen stilled on the desk. The line landed hard. I see, he said slowly. So now I'm the villain. You said it, she answered. He laughed again, a short, sharp sound that barely hid his irritation. I didn't have to. You framed it that way yourself. For a few seconds, they simply stared at each other. No movement, no banter, just two egos colliding under unrelenting light. The producer in the booth muttered, "This is getting dangerous." The director replied, "Keep rolling." Bill broke the silence first. "All right," he said, "let's talk about influence. You've criticized the press for controlling narratives, but you've spent years controlling your own. How's that different?" Her response was immediate. I'm controlling my truth, not the people telling lies about it, he smirked. But the result's the same, isn't it? You get to be the hero of your story. She leaned forward slightly, voice low. Maybe because no one else bothered to write me as one. The audience gasped again, the kind of gasp that means they're no longer watching an interview, they're watching a spectacle. Bill smiled tightly. So you are the hero. I'm the survivor, she said. There's a difference. The light seemed to burn hotter. Sweat gathered at the edge of Bill's collar, though his grin never left. He was enjoying it now. The fight, the fire, the audience leaning forward, hungry for blood. You know, he said, you're good at this. You know how to play the camera, the poise, the restraint. But underneath all that calm, you seem angry. Meghan exhaled through her nose. Wouldn't you be? He shrugged. I don't get angry on my show. Maybe that's the problem, she said quietly. Bill's smile faltered again. The crowd murmured. He looked down at his cue cards, then tossed them aside. All right, no more script, he said. Let's talk honestly. I thought we were, she said. Honesty means taking responsibility, he countered. And so far, I've heard a lot of justification. Not accountability. Meghan blinked. Accountability for what? For surviving abuse? For leaving a system that nearly broke me? What exactly do you want me to apologize for, Bill? For profiting from it, he shot back. Silence. Pure, heavy silence. Her breath came slow, deliberate. You're unbelievable, she said finally. You invite me here under the guise of conversation and then try to humiliate me. I didn't humiliate you, Bill said. You're doing fine on your own, the audience murmured, some shocked, some thrilled. Meghan's eyes flicked toward the audience, then back to him. You know what the difference is between us? She asked. Bill raised a brow. Enlighten me. You need conflict to stay relevant, she said. I need purpose to stay alive. The words hit like glass shattering. For a long beat, nothing moved. The audience sat frozen. Bill exhaled slowly. That's dramatic, he said at last. She smiled faintly. No, Bill. That's truth somewhere in the booth, a producer whispered. We need to go to break. But on stage, neither host nor guest heard. They were locked in. The camera zoomed in. Two faces inches apart across a polished desk. Two people smiling through gritted teeth. A show that had begun with charm now pulsed with something darker. Not anger exactly, but defiance. Raw and human. The audience didn't know whether to clap or breathe. And Bill Maher, a man who prided himself on control, realized too late that control had just left the room. The air inside the studio was no longer neutral. It had turned metallic, that taste of nerves before lightning hits. Every camera operator, every audience member, every producer up in the booth knew it. What had started as conversation was now a duel fought with smiles and microphones. Bill shifted slightly in his chair, the practiced ease replaced by something harder, colder. Let's talk about perception, he said. You've spoken about being misunderstood, misrepresented, misquoted. But isn't there a part of you that's benefited from that? You've built an empire on being the one wronged. Meghan's chin lifted. I built nothing on pain. I built on purpose. The difference is intention, Bill repeated, like tasting a word he didn't believe. That's convenient. A low ripple spread through the audience. Meghan folded her hands together, voice measured. Convenient for whom? You think any of this, the headlines, the judgment, is convenient? That's easy to say when you're not the one being dissected. Bill leaned forward, elbows on the desk. Dissected, sure, but also adored. You wanted to leave the royal bubble, and now you live in one of your own making. Cameras, interviews, deals. You call it purpose. Some call it PR, Meghan didn't flinch. And some call it survival. Survival with a production budget, he added. The crowd tensed. Some gasped, others laughed too loudly. Bill heard both and smirked, the spark of provocation lighting behind his eyes. She shook her head slowly. You can't imagine a woman succeeding without assuming she's manipulating something, can you? I can imagine it, Bill said. I just haven't seen it tonight. Gasps. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Even Bill looked momentarily surprised at what he'd said, then doubled down with that trademark shrug that said, Your move. Meghan's breath hitched once. Then she smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. You mistake cruelty for cleverness, and you mistake criticism for cruelty. She leaned forward. There's a difference between challenging someone and trying to humiliate them. Bill's grin thinned. Welcome to real time. No one gets crowned here. The audience laughed nervously, unsure whose side they were on. The cameras zoomed in closer, and the duel framed in tight shots, her calm, his bite, the faint gleam of sweat along the collar of his suit. The next question came without warning. Do you miss the Queen? He asked suddenly. Meghan blinked. Excuse me? Her Majesty, the late Queen. You spoke of her warmly once. Do you ever regret how things ended? There was no softness in the way he said ended. It sounded like accusation disguised as curiosity. Meghan hesitated, the first real crack of uncertainty. I respected her deeply, she said carefully. Our relationship was private, and I choose to keep it that way. Bill nodded, then pushed. Private, sure. Until Netflix? A wave of murmurs rolled through the room. Someone in the audience actually groaned. She stared at him. That's beneath you. Maybe, he said, but not beneath the truth. Her lips parted, then closed again. A long breath. When she finally spoke, the control in her voice was surgical. You invited me here to talk about causes, not to relitigate grief. I invited you to be honest. I am being honest. About what helps your image, sure. Something inside her snapped. It was quiet, a flicker more than a break, but every person in the room felt it. You don't know a thing about my image, she said, the veneer of calm gone. You just decided what it was before I walked out here. Bill's eyes lit with that dangerous excitement interviewers get when they know they've drawn blood. So set the record straight. Who is Meghan Markle without the crown, without the cameras? She stared right at him. Someone you'll never understand. For a beat, there was nothing but breathing, hers steady, his measured. Then he smiled again, but it was tight, brittle. You're right. I don't understand the urge to play victim on prime time. That's funny, she shot back. You've made a career out of being one. The audience gasped, half laughed. Bill froze for a half second before his smirk returned. Touché, he said softly, though the word came out like venom. Up in the booth, a producer whispered, Do we cut to panel? The director shook his head. If we cut now, the internet will crucify us. Let it roll. Bill adjusted his cufflinks, keeping his tone deceptively calm. You've called the royal institution toxic, the press racist, and the family cold. Is everyone wrong but you? I never said everyone, she replied, but if everyone stayed silent, nothing would change. He tilted his head. And what changed exactly? Other than your address? The laughter was sparse this time. Even the audience seemed uneasy. Meghan's hand curled into a fist against her knee, hidden from view. What changed is that people saw behind the curtain. Bill nodded, leaning closer. And now you're behind your own. That's the difference, she said. Mine's transparent. He chuckled. Transparent? You've spent the last 3 years curating every appearance down to the angle of your jawline. Her mouth opened in disbelief. Wow, that's the level we're at? That's the level you've chosen. Then maybe you should stop mistaking confidence for calculation. And maybe you should stop confusing press releases with authenticity. The back and forth was no longer a rhythm, it was recoil. Every line snapped like wire under tension. The crowd sat in complete silence now, no laughter, no cues, just the steady hum of stage lights and the low mechanical whir of cameras capturing every breath. Bill straightened, eyes narrowing slightly. Let me ask you one last thing, Meghan. When you look back at all this, the royal wedding, the interviews, the fallout, do you ever wonder if maybe the problem wasn't the system? Maybe the problem was you? A gasp broke from the second row. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Even the boom operator's hands trembled. Meghan stared at him, a long, heavy silence filling the gap where anger should have been. Then slowly, she rose from her chair. The crowd stirred. The floor manager motioned for her to sit, but she didn't. Are we really doing this? She asked quietly. Bill blinked. Doing what? This, the cheap shots, the public takedown. You could have asked about the charity I started, or the mentorship programs, or the mental health work we do. But you'd rather provoke. It's not provocation, Bill said. It's reality. No, she said, it's entertainment. And I'm done playing your villain. He leaned back slightly, arms folding. Then maybe you shouldn't come on shows called Real Time. She let out a soft laugh, but it was empty, exhausted. Maybe you should rename it Cheap Time. A few people clapped impulsively, others gasped again. Bill's expression hardened. Sit down, Meghan. No, she said. I think I've answered enough insults disguised as questions. Sit down, he repeated, quieter now, that low warning tone parents use before a storm. She looked right at him, eyes gleaming under the lights. You don't get to tell me what to do. The audience froze. Bill glanced at the camera, then at the crew. Cut to break, but the red recording light stayed on, live feed still rolling. Meghan took a single step backward, voice calm but shaking at the edges. This right here is why women stop speaking. Because the moment we stop smiling, you call it defiance. Bill stood. Enough. No, not yet, she said. I came here to have a conversation, not to be dissected for sport. You came here to perform, he said sharply, and the performance is over. Then you can end it, she said. I already have. The room erupted into whispers. The audience didn't know if they should clap or stay silent. Bill's producer waved frantically from off camera, but neither of them looked away from each other. Bill stepped forward. You're done here, he said, low, final, like a judge handing down a sentence. Her face didn't move for several seconds. Then calmly, she unhooked the microphone pack from her waist. The sound of the Velcro tearing filled the silence. She set it on the desk with care, the small thud echoing louder than it should have. Thank you for proving my point, she said quietly. And then she turned, heels clicking against the floor like a metronome marking the death of politeness. The audience watched in stunned stillness as she disappeared behind the black curtain at the edge of the set. No music played, no applause followed, just silence, deep and uncomfortable. Bill stood there, one hand resting on the desk, the other gripping the cue card he'd never read. His face was unreadable. He exhaled slowly, then looked toward the control booth. We'll cut that part, he muttered. But the control room didn't move fast enough. The feed had already gone live. The moment had already escaped the building. Backstage, Meghan kept walking, past crew members, past interns, past the green room door where her assistant waited, wide-eyed. Are you okay? The assistant asked. Meghan didn't answer. She just kept moving, the adrenaline running cold now. Her jaw trembled once before she steadied it. Let's go, she said finally. Now. Out the back exit, the night air hit her, crisp, quiet, real. She inhaled deeply, trying to wash the artificial brightness off her skin. Behind her, she could still hear muffled laughter from the studio, like an echo from another world. Inside, Bill Maher sat back down, alone on stage. The crowd didn't know what to do. He forced a smile. Well, he said finally, that was lively. A few nervous laughs broke out. He continued, his voice finding rhythm again. I've interviewed presidents, activists, comedians, but rarely someone who mistakes disagreement for disrespect. More laughs, louder this time. He straightened his notes, regaining his balance. We'll be back after the break, assuming we still have a guest. Applause, scattered, uncertain, filled the air, but the unease lingered, thick and visible. The lights dimmed, the commercial music swelled. Bill dropped the smile the second the cameras cut. Get me the network, he said quietly to the producer. We'll need to clean that up before it airs. Too late, she said. Clips are already out. Bill's jaw tightened. How? People were streaming from the audience, she said. It's everywhere. He turned toward the monitors. There it was, the feed replaying from 10 seconds ago, already clipped, already spreading. The red bar beneath the footage read, Meghan Markle walks out of real-time live show. He rubbed his temples, exhaling through his nose. Of course. Back in the hallway, Meghan's phone buzzed nonstop. Messages flooded in from her team, her husband, her publicist. She ignored them all. She reached the car waiting by the curb, climbed inside, and stared out at the glow of the city. Her reflection in the window looked like someone she didn't fully recognize. Composed, but emptied. In the distance, the faint echo of applause carried out of the building. The sound of a man regaining his stage. She whispered, barely audible, "Let him have it." The driver nodded silently and pulled away. Inside the studio, Bill sat through the next segment as if nothing had happened. The laughter returned eventually, mechanical and thin. But every time the red light blinked on, he felt it, that empty chair across from him, the ghost of the conversation that had spiraled beyond control. For a man built on confidence, it was the first time he'd looked small on his own stage. By the time the cameras cooled, the night outside the studio had already turned electric. Phones glowed in the darkness of the parking lot. Whispers rippled through crew members filing out the stage doors. No one said it aloud, but everyone knew they had just filmed the kind of moment that careers are measured against. Inside, editors hovered around the playback screens. The monitors replayed the walkout from 3 different angles: the microphone drop, the pause, the slow turn toward the exit. Each replay made the air heavier. "Do we cut to black after she leaves?" a technician asked. "Leave it," the producer said. "That's the clip people will remember." Upstairs, Bill Maher sat alone in his dressing room. The laughter from the next taping cue had died down. The silence pressing in now felt unfamiliar. He loosened his tie, stared at his reflection, and for a flicker of a second, even he looked unsettled. He'd had blow-ups before, politicians storming off, comedians walking out, activists crying on air, but this felt different. This was a Duchess. This was a global headline waiting to happen. He leaned back in the chair, rubbing his temples, half smiling at the absurdity of it. "What did you expect?" he muttered to no one. "You poke the crown, you get the sword." By midnight, the internet had already done its job. Clips of the confrontation flooded every social platform within minutes. The title changed depending on who uploaded it. Bill Maher destroys Meghan Markle on live TV. Meghan Markle walks out after sexist attack. The interview that ended in silence. Each headline drew its own army. Hashtags began trending before the East Coast even woke up. Hashtag Maher versus Markle. Hashtag You're Done Here. Hashtag Real-Time Meltdown. Under one clip, a viewer wrote, "Finally, someone said what we're all thinking." Another replied, "Finally, a woman stood up to being cornered on national TV." By dawn, 2 million views. By noon, 10. In Montecito, Meghan sat at the kitchen island, a mug of untouched tea cooling beside her. The curtains were drawn, but light filtered through in soft stripes across the marble counter. Her phone buzzed in a steady rhythm, calls from her publicist, texts from friends, emails marked urgent. She didn't answer any of them. Harry appeared at the doorway, barefoot, hair rumpled from sleep. He glanced at the screen she was watching, the replay of her walkout. The clip looped again. Bill's words, the microphone dropped, the sound of her heels fading into silence. "Turn it off," he said gently. She didn't. "It's everywhere." He sighed, crossing the room. "It'll pass." "Will it?" she asked. "Or will they keep slicing it until it fits the story they want?" Harry placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then tell yours again." She shook her head. "They don't listen. They just react." For a long moment, they stayed that way, 2 silhouettes in the half-light, the echo of applause from another world humming faintly through the television speakers. Across the country, newsrooms were already drafting op-eds. The Washington Post called it a cultural collision on live television. Variety described it as the moment Bill Maher lost his cool. Meanwhile, tabloids plastered still frames of Meghan's final glare beside headlines reading, "Diva Duchess walks out again." Cable news ran the footage on a loop. Commentators dissected every pause, every glance, every micro-expression. Was she right to walk out? Was he right to confront her? Who crossed the line first? One panel of talking heads debated tone versus truth for an hour straight, never once realizing they were repeating the same rhythm as the argument itself, talking over, defending, accusing, spinning. In the online battlefield below, memes bloomed like weeds. Bill's raised eyebrow captioned, "Triggered." Meghan's exit captioned, "Grace under fire." The world had turned their 15-minute clash into an overnight sport. By evening, Maher was back at the studio, sitting with the network's senior producer. She looked tired, papers fanned across her lap. "Damage control?" he asked. "Containment," she corrected. "The clip's viral. We're already trending worldwide." He smirked faintly. "That's not damage. That's ratings." She shot him a look. "It's also backlash." He shrugged. "Controversy keeps the lights on." "Not when the sponsors start calling." He glanced toward the muted monitor on the wall. Another network was replaying the confrontation with the caption, "Bill Maher under fire." He rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. "You think I went too far?" She hesitated. "You went exactly as far as you always do." But this time, the other person didn't play along. He laughed quietly. "Guess the Duchess doesn't do punchlines." "Guess not," she said, standing. "You should say something." He waved her off. "I'll say it on air next week." Let them stew. But later, when the room was empty, he found himself replaying the moment anyway, the look she gave him before walking out. Not anger, not humiliation, something else. Finality. For the first time in a long career of provocation, Bill Maher wondered if maybe the joke had landed on him. By the next morning, Meghan's team issued a short statement. The Duchess of Sussex appeared on Real Time to discuss her charitable work and was met with hostility and personal attacks. She chose to leave rather than engage further. She stands by her decision to prioritize respect over ratings. It was only 3 sentences long, but it set the tone. Supporters praised her composure. Critics called it spin. Every outlet found a way to stretch those lines into a story. Bill Maher's camp, meanwhile, released no official comment, just a single tweet from his account that read, "If you can't handle questions, don't go on live TV." That tweet alone gathered 500,000 replies, a battlefield of opinions colliding beneath it. Days passed, but the noise refused to fade. Clips flooded TikTok, remixed with dramatic music, slow-motion exits, and freeze-frame close-ups. Podcasts dissected body language. YouTubers analyzed the psychology of confrontation. Late-night shows parodied the scene with impersonators mimicking Meghan's quiet fury and Bill's sardonic tone. The spectacle had transcended the interview. It was no longer about what happened, it was about what people wanted it to mean. In the quiet corners of the internet, though, something different emerged. Conversations about boundaries, about respect, about how easily strong women are labeled difficult. A teacher in Chicago showed the clip to her media class. A columnist in London wrote, "For once, silence spoke louder than sound bites." By the end of the week, the studio uploaded the full, uncut episode to HBO Max. Within hours, it broke viewing records. People didn't tune in for politics or comedy, they tuned in for confrontation. Bill returned to his desk the following Friday, the same audience cheering, though the applause sounded different, part excitement, part curiosity. He started his monologue with a grin. "Well," he said, "last week was eventful." Laughter. "I've been called a misogynist, a hero, a national embarrassment, and my personal favorite, the man who got Markled." The audience roared. He held up a hand. "But hey, in my defense, I was just doing my job, asking questions." Some people answer, some people walk. It landed half-heartedly, but it landed. Behind the camera, the producer exhaled. He'd found his rhythm again, but the shadow of that empty chair still hovered at the edge of the frame. Far from the lights, Meghan walked along the beach near her home, sand damp beneath bare feet, the Pacific stretching endless ahead. The morning was quiet except for the waves and the muffled clicks of photographers waiting beyond the dunes. She ignored them. Each step left a print that the tide immediately erased. For the first time in days, she smiled, small, almost imperceptible, but real. "Let them talk," she murmured. Behind her, the ocean kept its own rhythm, unbothered by human noise. A week later, the confrontation found its place in cultural history. Podcasts named it the real-time reckoning. Newspapers filed it under media moments that changed the conversation. It became a shorthand for every televised implosion since. The night civility officially surrendered to spectacle. And then, slowly, the world moved on. Another headline, another feud, another week. Yet the footage remained, archived on servers and in minds, replayed whenever the world wanted to see what happens when control meets defiance under unrelenting light. Bill Maher kept hosting. Meghan Markle kept working. Both pretended not to remember. But somewhere beneath all the noise, both knew they'd stood on opposite sides of a mirror that night, each seeing the reflection they least wanted to face.